it
Okay.
is, well, 7 p.m., 2 minutes here.
Yeah.
Right. Okay,
Perfect.
so let's start without, yeah, well, as Louis says, I'm very so sorry not to be able to be with you today because when I see the list of speakers, I mean, that looks like Christmas to me. And I hope that this conference is the first of a series and that we'll be able to gather together again soon. So today I'm going to talk about a central concept in medieval Latin astrology, but at the same time a concept that is hardly discussed at all in modern literature. So that's the concept of the Almuten. Let me say first a few words about the term Almuten. This is obviously not Latin. It derives from the Arabic al-muqtaz, meaning the winner. Um, in Latin, you normally you find the word as a transliteration: al-muqtaz, al-muqtez, al-mutaz, al-mutam, al-mutem, al-muten. But believe me, the most common form of the word in Latin is almuten. And the fact that the Z became an M or an N is not surprising. It's not a mistake in transliteration, but rather a mistake in copying, because in Latin paleography, the Z and the M as the last letter of a word can be easily confused. So you find the term as well in Latin translation as dominator, dispositor, gubernator, significator, victor, dux, and other words that I am not aware of. Of course, these words may be problematic because they mean other concepts in astrology as well, especially terms like significator and dispositor. Um, Now, what is the Almuten? To state it briefly, the Almuten is the most powerful planet in a particular degree of the chart of any horoscope. Powerful, what does that mean? It means actually the planet that has the most essential dignities in the degree in question. In medieval and Renaissance and early modern Europe, it is normally determined by adding up the points of essential dignities owned by the planets in that degree. And in order to do that, you count 5 points or 5 powers for the domicile, that is the house, 4 points for the exaltation, 3 points for the triplicity, 2 points for the term, and 1 point for the decan. And those five are the five essential dignities. There are none others. Um, right. Funnily enough, it's not easy to find a very clear and complete account, a definition of the Almuten in medieval sources. In most cases, it is supposed to be known and understood, but you will find two excellent accounts in the introduction of Alcabitius, sections 122, 127, and 47, or in the Book of Nativities by Abraham ibn Ezra, section 313. Of that book, there are multiple Latin translations. So yes, well, it is part of the title, but I'm talking here about the Latin tradition of the Middle Ages and the early modern period, and not the Arabs or the. Right. So this way of determining the Almuten is a medieval invention. If you look at Greek sources, there are various ways of determining the ruling planet or the most powerful planet, but it's hard to find a consensus in Greek sources. Typically, the sources they are obscure, incomplete, and contradicting each other. The closest account in Greek to the system I just explained is found in Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos, especially book 2, chapter 8, and book 3, chapter 3. Uh, Ptolemy uses a system based on the essential essential dignities just like this one. But there are two main differences between Ptolemy and the medieval Latin system. First, Ptolemy does not use the decans. Actually, he never uses the decans in the Tetrabiblos. So this is not counted. And the second difference is that Ptolemy does not use this sort of weighted system from 1 to 5. He doesn't explain, Ptolemy is often obscure, and he is also obscure on this point. He does not exactly explain what is the relative strength of each of the essential dignities, which suggests that to him they are all considered equal. So those are the two main differences. So it seems that the earliest source that speaks of that weighted system is Al-Kindi in the text known as the 40 chapters. It's chapter 137 in that text. And it is also clear that the early Arabic astrologers like Mashahala, Zal, or Abu Ali al-Khayyat do not know this weighted system. So it would appear that it was invented by some Arabic astrologers sometime in the first half of the 9th century. Right. So what are the uses of the Almuten? The Almuten is essential in nativities. When you deal with nativities, you cannot avoid using the Almuten. First of all, because when you try to rectify a chart by the method known as the Animodar, this method is based on the Almuten of the degree of the Zizigi preceding birth. Second, if you want to determine the Alkochoden, that's a significator that allows you to estimate the length of the life of the native. The Alkochoden is in fact the Almuten of the degree of the Hileg. Okay, I'm sorry for the proliferation of technical terms, but I assume that many of you in the audience know what I am talking about. If not, I would say it doesn't matter too much. The third use of the Almuten in nativities is that it is simply also the general ruler of the chart, of the nativity. In particular, this has to be calculated this way. It is the Almuten of the so-called 5 places of life, which are sometimes called elegiacal places. Why? Because these are the 5 planets or mathematical points which can be elected as eleg. This is the sun, the moon, the ascendant, the part of fortune, and the Zizigi preceding birth. So you see here that if you want to cast and interpret a nativity, if you cannot determine the Almuten, you will not go very far. And in practice, we see that almost all astrologers that interpret a nativity will use the Animodar, the Alkochoden, and often the general ruler of the nativity as well. Now, the Almuten is also used in other branches of astrology, like in mundane astrology. Look at Ptolemy Tetrabiblos, Book 2, Chapter 8, Book 2, Chapter 13, and also in interrogations. For example, according to Al-Kabizi 177, and this is confirmed by his distinguished commentator John of Saxony, the Almuten, the significator of the topic, of the inquired topic, is the Almuten of the house representing that topic. That is, if you inquire about money, for example, you will look for the second house, that is money, and the significator of money will be the Almuten of the cusp, of the position of the cusp of the second house. So you see, the Almuten is a little bit like all over the place in astrology. I am sure that there are other uses. I still need to look. I mean, there are still many things I need to look at on this topic, which I found actually surprisingly difficult when I proposed this topic, I thought that should be easy to deal with. It's not at all, not at all. Right. So if you want to calculate the Almuten, you need to understand, of course, the 5 essential dignities. Now you will tell me this is not a problem. Most astrologers would know them, maybe not by heart, but at least they would know the domiciles, the exaltations, probably the triplicities. Now, when it comes to the terms and decans, it's more difficult. You really need a table to find your way. So such a table, and I use this image on purpose because I suppose, Luis, you said a word about Elena at the start of the conference, and I am using here the manuscript that was so dear to her, the main manuscript of her book, that is the Lisbon 1711, and this is one of the pages of that astrologer's S. Bell. This is his tables of essential dignities, presumably the table he used himself to calculate the Almuten. And actually, you can see at the top here, Almuten. This is really designed for calculating the Almuten. This is in the title of the table. Right. Now, I believe that if you want to calculate the Almuten using those tables, it is going to take a long time and it's really arduous. So I would prefer, do you have my handout?
Yes.
Yeah, you do. Okay.
Yes,
so I
everyone
believe
has.
it would be easier to do it with my handout also for me to explain to you how it works. Well, I said that I'm sure that many of you know that already, but let me repeat. So, so this handout actually gives you the essential dignities for each of the 30 degrees of each sign of the zodiac. So here I have on the screen the examples of the first 2 signs, Aries and Taurus. You have the 30 degrees on the left column, and then you have D5, E4 up to F1. That's domicile 5 points, exaltation 4 points, triplicity 3 points, term 2 points, facies or decan 1 point. So in the case of Aries, we know that Mars is the ruler of Aries, or Aries is the domicile of Mars. Mars has 5 points. The Sun is exalted in Aries. The Sun gets 4 points. For the triplicity, it's slightly tricky because there are 3 rulers of each triplicity. You have the ruler by day, that is the Sun here, by day, Jupiter by night, and then there is a third planet that is called sometimes the particeps, or let's call it the participant. I put it in bracket here because, as I have seen, it is sometimes taken into account, sometimes not at all. And then you have the terms. That's a division of each sign of the zodiac in 5 unequal parts ranging from 2 to 12 degrees, each of them ascribed to 1 planet, luminaries accepted. So it's only the 5 standard planets. And finally, you have F1, facies, decan, the 3 decans of each of 10 degrees each, also allocated to a planet, this time the Sun and the Moon included. And then I have, in the last 2 columns, I calculated the Almuten for you by day and by night. And by day, it is the Sun in the 1st degree of Aries with 7 points. Why 7? Because it's 4 for the exaltation and 3 for the triplicity by day, and so on and so on and so on. So you have for each, in your handout, you have the full list. I believe these tables would be easier to use than the tables of S. Bell. That you find that kind of tables you have here in front of you, you find those in dozens and dozens of astronomical and astrological manuscripts, and there is little doubt that the main aim of those tables is the calculation of the Almuten, as it is clear in the case of S. Bell. Okay, so let me show you a very clear and simple example. This is Johannes Schoner. Is treatise on De Judicis Nativitatum, on the judgments of nativities, published in 1545. And in this text, he takes as an example the nativity of Emperor Maximilian I, who was born in 1459 and already dead when Schoner published his treatise. And near the beginning of the book, he calculates the Almuten of Maximilian, which he calls Victor se or the Dominum Geniturae, the Lord of the Nativity or the Lord of the Geniture. He explains, he recalls, he reminds us of the rule, and then he has a table that calculates, as I said earlier, the points of essential dignities owned by the planets in the 5 places of life. Remember the elegiacal places, which are the sun here, the moon, the ascendant, the part of fortune, and the conjunction which precedes, that is the zizigi preceding birth. He takes the position straight from the horoscope that he himself cast for Maximilian. You can see the sun here, 1040 Aries, and he has here the sun at 11 Aries. Of course, 1040 means the 11th degree, so it cannot be rounded down to 10. It has to be 11. So all that is perfectly fine, correct, no problem. And then if you compare this table with your handout, let's take the sun at the 11th degree of Aries. Look at 11th degree of Aries in your handout. You will see that the domiciles, as we said, this is Mars. The exaltation, sorry, the titles are given at the bottom of the table. Domus, exaltatio, triplicitas, terminus, and facies, right? So the sun at 11 Aries, the domicile is Mars. The exaltation is the sun. And then the triplicity is the sun by day. Why? Because this is the diurnal nativity. The sun is in the 7th house above the horizon. Here it takes Saturn as the participant. So Johannes Schoner takes into account the participant. Then we have the term Venus, correct, and the decan. I can't find my. Okay, and the decan is allocated to the sun. All this is correct. I have verified the whole table. This is correct. And then at the bottom, he gives the sum of all degrees owned by all planets in those 5 places of life. And for example, take Saturn, 6. Why? Because you see that actually Saturn features twice in that table, twice as the participant of a triplicity. 3 plus 3 is 6. Fine, correct. Now, the thing is, for some reasons that I find really hard to understand, he managed to make 3 mistakes in adding all the points of essential dignities. Jupiter actually should be given 0, not 6, Mars 24, not 27, and the Moon 7, not 13, which is very regrettable in a text that is aimed at being a didactic text, teaching the student how to cast, how to construct, and how to interpret nativities. But that tells us that if this is not complicated in itself, it is arduous, to say the least. And even in this case, the case of didactic text, he managed to make 3 mistakes. Now we might think that actually these are not mistakes, but perhaps adjustments due to some additional factors that we are not told about. But this is certainly not the case, because he speaks about those factors nowhere around this calculation. It is not a printing mistake, because, for example, the degree of Mars is repeated here in the text. So these are mistakes. Okay, this was a 16th century example. We may go back in time and find a 13th century beautiful example. This is the nativity of the French king Louis X, born in 1289. And his nativity his horoscope was cast soon after he was born by some Parisian astrologers who, below the horoscope, have a table very similar to the one I just showed you from Schöner. You have here the 5 places of life: the sun, the moon, the part of fortune, the ascendant, and in gradu oppositionis, the syzygy preceding birth. And then the points are located in each of those 5 places by each of the planets, and then the total and so on. So you see, this is something that was done normally. To come back to the famous handbook of Esbel, studied by Elena, um, we find something very similar, except that here he gives only the final results. He calculated he added up the points of essential dignities and accidental dignities, as he says in the title, for each planet, and concluded that the Almuten was Saturn in this case. This is the horoscope of Louis XI, King of France as well. Unfortunately, this is, you find that kind of tables, that kind of tables quite often, but it's difficult um, to calculate in retrospect what he did because he doesn't give the details. And here he took into account accidental dignities. And this is something I find really tricky because in theoretical text, I can't find how accidental dignities affect the calculation of the Almuten. But I still have to look at quite a few texts. Maybe I'll find the answer when it comes to write the paper for our volume. Right. So we're staying in the 13th century. This is one of the first. I'll show you one of the first instances of calculation of the Almuten by Campanus of Novara. At least this is something that occurs in his tables of Novara in one of the earliest manuscripts. And just like Esbel, Campanus gives us a table of all the essential dignities. And then on the following pages, he has a peculiar table giving the total, let's call it the Almuten, because this is clearly the Almuten, the sum of points owned by each planet in each of the signs of the zodiac. So we have Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and so on, and here the 12 signs of the zodiac. Oops, sorry. So Saturn gets 5 points in Aries. Jupiter 5 points in Aries. Again, this is adding. Saturn, we have seen, has 3 points because he is the participant of the triplicity, and 2 points because he has the term. He has one of the terms of Aries. So 3 plus 2, 5, and so on. I mean, the table is perfectly correct. This table is found in a large number of manuscripts, typically astrological and astronomical manuscripts, and often among astronomical tables, which of course does not come as a surprise. So here we see that Campanus, just like Johannes Schoner, takes the participant of the triplicity into account because Saturn is given 5 points in Aries. This is not always the case. As I said, this table is found in many manuscripts. In this other example from the 15th century, you see that Saturn is given only 2 points because this astrologer decided that Saturn as a participant doesn't count. And this is not a copying mistake. This is clearly 2 was meant because if you look at Taurus, you see that Mars is given only 2 points while he is also the participant of the triplicity of Taurus. And here you even find a table which had the number 5 for Saturn in Aries, and then someone, maybe the scribe, deleted that 5. This is shown by the little dot under the means to be deleted, and had another number 2 in superscript. Okay, That kind of tables, maybe I know 30 or 40 manuscripts of those tables, but I started to search for them very recently, so I'm pretty certain that there are dozens and dozens of them. So similar tables can appear here. You have an example of the Alphonsine tables in a 14th century manuscript. And again, here, instead of having the total owned by each planet in the signs, you have the details. So, sorry, it's the table here at the bottom of the page. Saturn is given in Aries 3 plus 2. So that in this case, you have the details. Fine. This table is also very commonly found in the form of a rota divided into 12 sections corresponding to the 12 signs. Here you have Aries and the 7 planets. And again, you find Saturnus 2 plus 3. In another case, you find here Aries, but Saturn only 2. The participant is not counted. And likewise here, Saturn in Aries, only 2, participant not counted. So now let's go back to the table of Campanus 13th century. I'm wondering who made those tables and for what purpose? Because when calculating the Almuten, what we need is the Almuten over a particular degree of the zodiac, not of the whole sign. But at the same time, those tables are found so often that there must be a reason. And I am wondering, the more I think of that and the more convinced I am that this must be correct. In fact, for those astrologers, it seems to me that the calculation of the Almuten for the whole sign replaced simply the ruler of that sign, so that those astrologers would consider that the ruler of Libra is not Venus, as any one of us would do spontaneously, but actually Saturn. If you look at your handout, Saturn is the most powerful planet, not over all the degrees, but I think over most of the degrees of Libra. Okay, now let's go back to more complicated tables. This becomes more interesting. This manuscript was copied at the University of Vienna around 1437. And this is a manuscript entirely copied by a certain Georgium Pruner de Rusbach. And he copied, the manuscript is almost entirely devoted to the works of John of Gmunden, the distinguished astrologer and astronomer, also professor at the University of Vienna, who was still alive when this manuscript was copied. And it is possible that actually John of Gmunden was also the author of this table. This is one of my favorite tables for the calculation of the Almuten. Again, you find the 7 columns corresponding to the 7 planets and the 12 lines corresponding to the 12 signs of the zodiac. So if you look at Saturn in Aries, you have 3, 2. Remember, always the same numbers, 3 because Saturn is a participant of the triplicity, and 2 because of the term. But here you get actually all the necessary information to calculate comfortably the Almuten in just one page. When you look at the term represented by 2, as reminded in the title Domus 5, Exaltatio 4, and so on, Terminus 2, you have for Saturn the first and the last degree of its term in Aries, from 26 to 30. On top of this, you have special symbols that have been designed to tell you which ruler of the triplicity among the 3 possibilities you should select, or which of the 3 decans you should select. And these symbols are this dot here. It's not simply a dot, it is really a big dot. that the author explains in his instructions on the next page. This is what he calls a punctus simplex. Here, next to the number 3 for the triplicity. In the case of Jupiter in Aries, you have a dot with a stroke oriented downwards that he calls the punctus depressus. Elsewhere, for the Sun in Aries, you have a dot with a stroke oriented upwards. That's what he calls the punctus elevatus. And those symbols allow you to decide, all that is explained, to decide that in this case, the punctus simplex next to 3 means a participant of the triplicity, while the punctus depressus in the case of Jupiter in Aries next to 3 means the ruler of the triplicity by night, and so on and so on. With this table, you can calculate in one glance the Almuten in any degree of the zodiac, and it works quite well. Of course, you need to get acquainted of the peculiarities of the table, but once you are acquainted, maybe that table would be even better than my handout. Okay, I found the same table in a 16th century manuscript from Oxford. Okay, let's get over this. Let me just keeping an eye on the time. Oh my God! Right. Okay, I'll finish in 2 minutes. Here is another table. Also, everything is given in one page. You have the 7 columns corresponding to the 7 planets, but for each sign, you have 5 lines, numbered 5 for domicile, 4 for exaltation, 3 for triplicity, 2 for term, 1 for decan. And for each of these essential dignities, you have the number of points allocated to each planet. 5 for Mars in Aries, and so on and so on. This table allows you as well to calculate everything at a glance. And when it comes to the term, you have the indication of the first and last degree of each planet in the corresponding sign of the zodiac. So I'll jump to the next. So this is another sort of tables for calculating the Almuten by Giovanni Battista Boerio, who was the physician and astrologer of Henry VII and Henry VIII. And these are his tables. It's a bit longer, 6 pages, 2 signs per page. I'll show you the first page. In this case, he gives, it's closer to my handout, each degree of each sign and the points owned by each planet in each degree. Okay. A sort of similar table is found in a manuscript of the Alphonsine Tables, 15th century. You have again for each sign, this is only the first page corresponding to Aries. You have the 30 lines corresponding to the 30 degrees. Then you have the planetary symbol for each of the 5 dignities. And then you have a column for Almuten here, and he gives the Almuten. He has made all the calculation for you, except that these tables are problematic because he gives the Almuten by day only, and he neglects completely the Almuten by night. So this is a bit right. And this is my last table. Then I will stop to have some time for questions. This is Konrad Heingarter in his famous beautiful astrological manuscript, full of text and tables, and that he wanted to dedicate to Jean II, Duke of Bourbon. And you find a table that is slightly similar, except that he spares you of the domicile, exaltation, and triplicities because he considers that you know them. So he starts with the terms and the decan. He gives all sorts of characteristics of each of the 30 degrees of each sign, and also gives you a column Almuten. So he made all the calculations for you. But again, he calculated the Almuten by day only. So these tables are not valid for nativities by night. Okay. So this is, I'm at the end of, no. Sorry, I wanted to show you something I did like last minute. Um, I don't know.
You have
The
time.
person,
Don't worry.
the
You have plenty
astrologer
of time.
okay, thanks. The astrologer who designed this system of weighted Almuten from 1 to 5 doesn't seem to have realized, and apparently never, no astrologer realized that, as far as I can tell. But this system, it seems to me, conveys a very pessimistic view of the world. Because if you look at the sum of degrees owned by each planet throughout the entire zodiac, you will find that the two malefics, Saturn and Mars, come first and by far, while the two benefic, Venus and Jupiter, are allocated much fewer degrees. So to the extent that actually the two, in any nativity you would find, or in any astrological calculation, you would find a malefic as the Almuten almost twice as often as a benefic planet. Okay, so I hope to have shown you that the Almuten is a central topic in medieval and early modern astrology, and I suppose that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, David. You finished with plenty of time, and I'm seeing very eager people wanting to ask questions. So many questions, little time, but let's do it. So there's a microphone there for you to make a question. And David, if you cannot hear it, I'll repeat the question. Because
Okay,
can you still see my camera? I'm not sure.
I can see the audience at the moment.
Okay, great. That's it.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very clear explanation of the Almuten was calculated and some magnificent tables. I have just two queries. The first one, what use were the tables which just included the publicities and the terms, and without the house and without the decimals and exaltations? The second one is this very key question about the origin. I have it in my mind that there is a chapter in the book of Doctrines, Activities de Masha, which gives these 5 different degrees, which would predict for activity.
Okay. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, so for the first question, I'm not sure I have fully understood, but so you ask why the domicile and the exaltation and triplicity is omitted, for example, in that table by Konrad Heingarter, and how they do it. Actually, Konrad says that for Aries, he says at the top that the domus is Martis, exaltatio solis, triplicitas solis, Jovis et Martis. So he gives the general. It's not that he neglects them only in the table, but not in the calculation. And he supposes that the reader understands that the domus should be given 5 points and so on and so on. In any case, when you look at the total, it is certain that he counted the domus, the exaltatio, and the triplicity, but he considered they were known and did not need a specific column. As to the second question, this is very interesting. I should probably ask you for the reference or read the two texts, because we have two De Nativitatibus by Mashahala. Yes, what I noticed is that in another text by Mashahala, in the De Revolutionibus Annorum Mundi, in one chapter, he says that the term should be given like only a tiny part of the points or of the powers, but he is not. He says the sixth or the seventh. I forgot exactly what it is, and so it would imply that he knew some sort of weighted system. But I still need to work out that chapter. But I will certainly go back to the De Nativitatibus. Yeah. Thank you, Charles.
Any more questions? Oh, yeah.
Could you please show the last slide with the distribution of evidence according to the
Sorry.
I can't hear.
So if you could show the last slide.
Yes.
Any questions? Yeah, everyone was amazed with the percentages.
Yes, sorry. I don't want to be the troublemaker among astrologers.
So thank you for the useful presentation. It seems quite that you're quite interested in topics of Almuten. I have two questions for you. Just I'm curious to hear your opinion. Then, first of all, you mentioned that the first system to determine the Almuten is shown in Ptolemy, Tetrabibus. In the same time, he's not using Decans, he's using another concept on the place Decans, that's the phase. And for me, it is curious, maybe you have some working hypothesis on that. What is the reason that this changed in time? What is the reason that only he uses this fifth dignity of phase, and then it was transmitted to the medieval period, the Arab authors as a decan? Do you have any explanation of that? That would be my first question. And my second question.
Wait a second. I'm wondering whether it would be better to, because I didn't understand the question.
Okay.
So maybe you should come closer to the computer. That would be easier for me.
Okay.
For
So
everyone.
I'll try to repeat the question. So the question is, and Stein, please let me know if I'm picking it wrong. So your thoughts on why Ptolemy presents the face, and then it goes by, and then it's picked up as the face, the decanate later on. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. Or why Ptolemy? Why is that this difference in Ptolemy? What is your thoughts on that?
So the question is, why does Ptolemy not use the decans?
Yeah. And has that phase, dignity? He has a fifth dignity of phase, or I think.
Yeah, well, actually, he has. This is very weird because he has the four essential dignities, the usual ones, and then he omits the decans. But first of all, as far as I can tell, Ptolemy never uses the decans, which might seem bizarre in Egypt, but maybe he just doesn't know them. And second, besides the four essential dignities, decans not counted, he uses something that is the phasis and the suschematismos. It seems to me, but the specialists of Greek astrology will perhaps have an answer, but it seems to me that no one understands what Ptolemy means by that, because the translations are really different. And even if you translate by phase and configuration or phase and aspect, what does that mean? An aspect we understand, but I mean, how would you use an aspect in that context? And when you look at the Latin translations of the Tetrabiblos, clearly they were completely lost with those two words. They don't know what it means. Someone says that it's actually when it is under the rays of the sun, and someone would say something different. They don't understand Ptolemy on that point, which I must say this is not surprising, because Ptolemy is basically impossible to understand all along the Tetrabiblos anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My second question is more simple than the first one. I just wanted to ask you, in the examples you have given, there was used the Egyptian terms, tables, right?
Okay,
Yes.
so yeah,
The,
it's the
the, ans-
Egyptian.
the answer the answer is yes, as far as I can see.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And there's another question.
Yeah, I would like to ask you about the Schindler table. You refer to Jupiter as a mistake, having 6 points, but don't you consider Schindler considering it as one of the triplicities, even though it's the ninth one?
I didn't. Well, I understand that the question is about Schöner,
Yeah.
but I didn't get the question.
So the question is, wouldn't he consider it as being the night triplicity? So he's adding it as a night triplicity.
Even though it's not mentioned in the table, maybe consider Jupiter being one of the triplicities as well.
Look, maybe we should see whether that works for the whole table. But in that case, since we are dealing with a didactic treatise that is in general clear, why doesn't he say so? Because he helps the reader, like step by step throughout the process. Why would he arrive at sums that no one can understand because it's not explained?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Maybe just to mention the main ones, but also considering to the sum the others. That's thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that would be. It's possible. That would be interesting to see how that works for the whole table. Maybe that would actually should be easy to answer.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to make two remarks to this fantastic lecture. First thing is that maybe in the historical research for the background of mutants in the cervic system, we should consider that these numbers from 5 to 1 can be used in twofold ways. So first, like a weighing system for the relative strengths of the different dignities. And I think that in the early Arabic astrology, there was a disagreement about the relative strengths of terms and triplicities, as far as I can remember. For example, for star, terms were stronger than triplicities. So, and this is one thing. So the sort of a description of the relative strengths of dignities. And the other thing is using these same numbers for mutants that might be a later development. Is even in the Latin medieval tradition. So maybe we should also look into the details in this way. So this is one thing, and the other thing is that you mentioned that
Maybe we should I perhaps ask Luis to repeat the to translate the question for me? Sorry, I'm sorry
Okay.
because yeah.
it's not a question actually. Just
It's just a remark that I'll try to
Okay.
repeat it. That we have two different things. So we have a weighing system, with the points from 5 to 1, and then we have the Almuten, which might be perhaps a later development coming out from that system, and that there appears to be a disagreement, or at least an early alternative of weighing, where the term gains 3 points and the triplicity 2, which is mentioned by some of the early Arabic authors. They mentioned that variant. So this is just an observation.
yeah,
Okay. Good. Thank you.
I just wanted to make this remark for seeing better in this research. And the other thing is that you mentioned that you were looking for some sources for counting, so including the accidental dignities into the system of calculating mutants or mutant-like scoring systems. I guess that, as far as I remember, that there is the Latin tract by Ibn Ezra, De Nativitatibus, which is I think it was written originally in Latin, so it is not a Latin translation of his one of his natal works written in Hebrew. And I believe that there is a system explained there that takes accidental dignities into consideration.
Yes, actually, that's correct. But he doesn't list all the accidental dignities. He speaks mainly of the houses. So on top of the 5 essential dignities, he says that if a planet is in the first house, it should be given 12 points. If it is in another cardinal, it would be 10, 9, 8, and so on, going downwards. But that's only one. It seems to me it's only one additional factor to the calculation of the Almuten, and I didn't mention that today because that would leave me too far. But if you look at actually those Parisian astrologers that calculated the Almuten of Louis X, they have Domorum, and they correspond to exactly what Abraham ibn Ezra says the numbers. And we know that Abraham ibn Ezra was very popular in Paris at the end of the 13th century, so it's no surprise at all. Yes, but that it seems to me that Esbel, when he speaks about accidental dignities, he speaks of like more than that.
Yeah, let me add that on that. From what I remember, Esbele has not only the domification, so the houses, he also adds the planetary day and the planetary hour. And I think on the example you have from Louis the 11th, I think he adds 7 points to the ruler of the day and 6 points to the ruler of the hour. And I think that's one of the notes he has on the side, which is also following Ezra, at least one of the versions of Ezra.
Oh, that's great because that's exactly what you can find here. 6, and then aura or something, and 7
Yeah,
J
and 7,
or
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is you saw that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good. I should write this down. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I will remember. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes, Petra has one.
It's not a question, just a something to what Valente said. On my project page on the Tapsera, I've already published chapters on the decans, the triplicities, and the trims. There should be something about this discussion of rating the dignities. If you might have a look.
Okay. Could you hear that?
Yeah. So there might be a discussion and then I didn't hear.
In the translation of the Tapsira that Petra has made, she already has published a part where he discusses this kind of thing. So she thinks that it can add to your research.
Just 2 short chapters.
Yeah.
Checking.
That's good. Thank you, Petra. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. So thank you very much, David.
Thank you. So yeah, this is the end of the conference for me. I'm again very sorry.
Okay. It's a pity you're not here and you won't be able to see the rest of us. Well, we're recording all of this, so you can see them later
Oh,
on.
really? You are recording? Oh, that's great.
Yes,
Fantastic.
yes. So
That's fantastic. Yes. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
yeah, it was a pleasure to have you here from such a long distance, and thank you. And we are now going to our coffee break, so we'll have a few minutes extra. It's outside, and we'll be back here at 11 for Dorian Greenbaum's lecture.